Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our read-along of Frank Herbert's masterpiece, Dune. I never tire of doing read-alongs of this book, and we are going chapter by chapter through this first one. Will we go through them all? Well, certainly not in the time that's left in this year, but what do years matter to playlists? Not at all. So we are up to a pivotal chapter. Of course, the book doesn't call them chapters and doesn't number them or name them, but so we're going by the opening line, because Dune comes in all kinds of sizes and formats, so the opening line of the chapter will locate you. We are at the chapter midway through the book here called "Get Their Water." The man calling from the night had said, "Get their water" is how it starts off, and that is ominous because this deals with the survival of two fugitives. We are talking here about the downfall of House Atreides and the scattering of all of its members. One member doesn't quite get to scatter. Duke Leto Atreides just dies. And as far as we can see, the same thing is true for his master swordsman, Duncan Idaho. No spoilers there. And we've touched on or followed the fates of all the others. The Duke's War Master, Gurney Halleck, has signed on with smugglers and stayed on Dune. The Duke's Mentat, Thufir Hawat, has been captured by the Harkonnen, the evil enemies of House Atreides, the ones that brought about the house's downfall. We even saw the fate of Liet Kynes, the planetologist, who at least nominally helped the Harkonnen. And we are following the fate of the Duke's son and heir, young Paul, and the Duke's lady, Lady Jessica, who he never made a duchess. He never actually married her. But he did buy her from the Bene Gesserit, an all-female sect of super nuns in this far future society that have long goals for humanity. They're engaged in a gigantically elaborate eugenics program over decades, in an attempt to create the Kwisatz Haderach, to create a man who has some of the extrasensory and physical abilities of the Bene Gesserit. The Bene Gesserit are trained from childhood in endless amounts of memory recall. In every single tissue and cell of their body is trained to a hair's breadth of personal control, to the point where, as is crucial for the Lady Jessica, a Bene Gesserit adept can determine the sex of her infant child. And the sisterhood allows the Lady Jessica to marry Duke Leto because they want her to give him a daughter. And she refuses. She gives him Paul instead because she has fallen in love with him and knows how much a son would mean to him. But you're never supposed to think for a minute, well, how could she do that, right? How could she do it either way, whether she's in love with him or not? You're supposed to assume that these and other kinds of cellular powers belong to the Bene Gesserit and the Bene Gesserit alone, including something that Reverend Mothers among the Order have, which is the ability to look backwards along their female genetic line and possess all the memories of their genetic ancestors, of going back millennia. Not just their genetic traits, some of them, which can be inherited, but rather their memories, their sensations, all of that. Even their personalities, to the point where, much later on in the series, one of those personalities from the past can actually take over the physical body of the person who has them, if that makes any sense. In other words, in this science fiction future, the science fiction world that Frank Herbert has created, their genes are not like our genes. Their genes are basically mimeograph machines. They're basically the internet that never forgets. They contain the whole of you. But only women do this. They go through a ritual, and it awakens those ancestral memories. But the Bene Gesserit have been working forever and ever, shaping bloodlines of royal houses behind the scenes and mixing in non-royal blood when needed, to produce a male Kwisatz Haderach. The key thing to understand about the Bene Gesserit is that they've been doing this for a long time, well over 1,000 years. So, and always thanks to those communal memories, always with a greater sense of unified purpose than even the most fanatical organization, like, for instance, the Bene Tleilaxu, could possibly have. Jessica is an adept. She's an heir to all of that. She's not a Reverend Mother, but she's an heir to all of the Bene Gesserit abilities. She wasn't taught in childhood and then left to fend for herself like some other characters. She is well and truly the BG way. And she and Paul we're following their fate as they are outcast in the desert. The deserts of Dune are home to the spice, melange, that makes Dune a centerpiece for enormous amounts of wealth because it's found nowhere else in the galaxy and it's crucial to everything. But it's also home to gigantic sandworms that protect that spice ferociously. And the deep deserts are also home to the native inhabitants of Arrakis, the Fremen. A desert-dwelling people who wear still suits to recover their body's moisture and have the eyes of Ibad, the blue-on-blue eyes, no whites of the eyes. That means that your body has been completely saturated and addicted to the spice melange. And who have intense tribal ways. They are not impressed by outsiders. They have been, in fact, oppressed by the Harkonnen. And were only just recently introduced to Duke Leto when he was given control of the planet. Very briefly, he was able to hold it only a little while. But when they're introduced to him, specifically in the person of Stilgar, one of the leaders of the Fremen, they're impressed. Like everybody else, like we mentioned last time, they're impressed by what they see. These are not like the Harkonnen. These are very different people, more noble, more worthy of loyalty. And we now resume the story of Paul and Jessica. They have crossed a chunk of desert. They have narrowly evaded a sandworm, and they have entered into a rocky enclosure and find themselves watched. They have entered into a Fremen base, a minor Fremen base, and they are confronted by a band of Fremen, led by Stilgar. And we learn in this chapter, he tells his rebellious men and women that they heard the voice of the Cielago. In this world, little bats. I would like a whole book this big on the bats of Dune, but I'm never going to get it. Frank Herbert's son has been bastardizing this book and this series for decades. I'm surprised he hasn't written a book called The Bats of Dune, but he hasn't. That I would have bought. But they've received a message. We mentioned last time that Liet Kynes, before the Harkonnen kill him, sent out messages to his Fremen, warning them that the Duke's son was a fugitive and that they should take him in. That he's a valuable person and might be valuable to all the tribes. Stilgar is trying to convince his people of that, but Jessica and Paul don't know anything about that. They only know that this is dangerous. Very, very dangerous. These people could kill them. Especially Jessica, who's not young. He's not as young as Paul, and the Fremen say, in fact, Stilgar says in this chapter, you realize it's nothing personal, right? We just can't, we have to take your water for the tribe. The Fremen have a process by which they can distill a dead body's water and save it in packets for the tribe. We have to take your water because you don't have the skill necessary to travel around in the desert without giving us all away, without putting the whole tribe in danger. It's nothing personal. When Stilgar says that to her, with all these Fremen watching and with projectile weapons trained on them, Jessica seems to faint. She seems like it's just too much for her, oh my, and changes in mid-movement her feint into a lunge and easily incapacitates Stilgar and has him gripped by the throat with her behind him and the wall behind her. In an instant. It's a blur of motion. He doesn't have any chance to defend himself. This hardened warrior has no chance to defend himself. The minute she moves, Paul moves as well. Dodges into the shadows and crawls up the rockways, disabling a Fremen while he goes. A Fremen jumps in the way. Keep in mind, battle-hardened warriors, a 14-year-old boy, small for his age, disables him as though he were sneezing on the sidewalk, takes his weapon, and then hides up in the crevices as Stilgar is yelling, but not at Lady Jessica. He's yelling at his men. Put your weapons down. Stop firing. Can't you see how valuable this woman is? I was about to kill her, yes, but she has proven that she is a fighting adept in the weirding way. She knows all sorts of things that make her 10 times more valuable than a single individual. She clarifies for him a little bit earlier on that she's not a Reverend Mother. So the Fremen know about Reverend Mothers and value them. But this shows what her real value is, because the Fremen rule by right of combat. Stilgar is the best fighter in his group, and Jessica handles him like a child. And that's before they even realize that one of their warriors has been surprised on his own home ground by a boy and been incapacitated and disarmed as well. It's a tense moment, a very tense moment. At any moment, one of the Fremen could act hot-headedly and ruin everything. Jessica knows that, but fortunately, Stilgar's sense of proportion wins the day. And he promises her and Paul membership in his tribe. And that's the chapter. The man who Paul incapacitated is the hottest head in Stilgar's group, and also the one who was calling out to kill them. He's the one most likely to cause trouble, but he's unconscious while all this is going on. His name is Jamis, and we're going to meet him again. He is unconscious. Paul knocks him unconscious so that he can't object to any of this new arrangement. But he does wake up. He does wake up. And Stilgar puts Paul's well-being in his charge, and in the charge of a young woman, the daughter of Liet Kynes, named Chani, who, when Paul sees her, he's stunned because he's seen her before. She's been in his visions. So something is touching on what the book refers to as his terrible purpose. For Jessica, though, who doesn't know anything about his terrible purpose, the only purpose she has is to make sure that she and her son survive another day. And it looks like they're going to. That is this chapter that we're looking at now. Is that the extremely pivotal part is that this is the beginning of Paul's adoption into Fremen society, which is going to be incredibly important, not only for the rest of the book, but in the world of Dune, for the rest of the galaxy. That Fremen banner in the wind is born here. Nobody knows it yet. He doesn't even have a tribal name yet, but nevertheless. But anyway, we're going to move on from here. We're going to do the next chapter next time, so I will wrap this up, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.